Alright, so here we are testing out the 2 plus plus 2, and as we can see, it gives us the answer 4. This is showing us that the extra plus sign doesn't prevent this code from executing on our console prompt. Remember, it's best you try this in the console prompt and not in the code editor window so that you don't have to use any print statements, okay? Alright, so I'll be giving you some examples of how you copy and paste in the output and how you comment on that. It will be the same procedure for each of the different calculations, all right? Because we want to really get to the second part of the journal where you actually try out your own examples, okay? So the other examples will follow the same basic steps in which you will put the calculation in the console prompt area, press enter to run it, and then copy out whatever message appears. If you get an error message, you copy that out and paste in your journal notes. If it works, you still copy that output and put it in your journal notes, okay? So what we'll do here is that after running the code successfully, we'll copy out what happened when we run the code on the prompt, and we'll go to our Google Docs and paste it in. Google Docs I recommend, of course, because it saves your code automatically and it works online. So you'll paste your example in and you'll explain what happened in that code. Alright, so here I'm just giving an example of how you'd explain it. Please do not use my exact words. Please avoid plagiarism, okay? Just giving an example of how you would start to explain this, okay? You may add some more words, get into more details, and explain what happened with the code. Okay, so next we will try the second statement, which is 2 minus minus 2. We'll run that in the console area of replit.com, and let's see what this does for us. Alright, so once we enter in 2 minus minus 2 in the console and we press the enter key to run it and get the result, we get the answer 4. So it seems to give us the answer just the same as the first one where we added 2 plus 2. I'm going to explain why this happens in Python because it's a math principle that Python is using here of a double negative. So I'm going to explain it with some notes in the code area using some comments and some further code examples of how you multiply a negative times a negative and why that gives you a positive, resulting in it being an addition in the end. Okay, so you see here when we run this, it gives us the answer of 4 because the negatives appearing beside each other are being multiplied against each other and creating a positive. And so this is why we get an addition or a plus 4, okay? Because when you multiply a negative by a negative, you get a positive. So that's going to give us an addition, meaning it's not going to be 2 minus 2, but 2 plus 2. When the negative multiplies by the negative, it will give you a plus 2. And that's why we get the result 4 from 2 minus minus 2. Alright, hope that makes sense for you there. So as we did before, we'll copy out the code output and we'll paste it in our journal. Please do not use the code that I did in the main py file. That's not a part of the journal answer. I was just using that to explain the mathematical rules that create that double negative into a positive for us, okay? Alright, so that's what we're going to be doing for this explanation here. Just to put some notes here to show you what was happening here. You can take a note of it and read it to try to understand why this math rule creates a positive from a double negative. But that's what the compiler puts out, so you'll write in your journal notes exactly what happened in the output, that it created an addition with the double negative, and then you'll explain that further. If you need to use any references from a book, remember to put those in as well. Alright, so now we'll try the next statement, which is to put in 2 plus minus 2, and that gives us 0. Alright, so as you probably figured out what's happening here, the negative multiplied by the positive is what's happening here, and when you multiply a negative by a positive, you get a negative as a final number, and so it will be saying at the end, when we run this calculation, 2 minus 2. Again, you'll put the code in your notes and explain that as best you can. Remember to use any in-text citations if they're appropriate, if you're using the textbook, or if you found anything reference online, you use that reference at the end of your journal. Okay, so we were asked to describe at least 3 additional Python experiments that were tried while learning Chapter 1. So this is talking about Chapter 1 of the Think Python book. So we're going to go to that book and open it up so we can look at various bits of code that we would have learned in Chapter 1. And then from that, we're going to make our own examples of code that we're going to test out. All right, so let's get right to it. Let's open up that book right now. Okay, so this section here is quite open, meaning that you can use whatever parts of the code that you learned in Chapter 1. There is no one telling you which one to use as an example and experiment. And when you pick one, you're going to create a new example from that. So I'm going to give you some demonstrations of how you'll do that. So I'll pick one from the different sections of Chapter 1, and I'll create my own practice programming problem in Python. Okay, so you can go ahead and watch the problems I pick from and how I turn it into my own unique problem. Remember again, please avoid plagiarism and do not use the exact examples that I use. Please be creative and use unique or different examples in your own code. Okay, so you would paste in your first experiment with the code that you used. Whether the code ran successfully or not, you're still going to paste in the code and try to explain why you got the kind of output that you did. If you got an error, try to explain why there's an error based on your knowledge of chapter 1 that you read through and practice. And you do the same for 2 more experiments. I'll try to use 2 more examples to show you that you can pick anything and practice with that, okay? They're giving you no specific examples here. Remember, my examples are just demonstrations. Also, you remember not to copy my examples to avoid plagiarism, as there will be other persons watching this video as well. Alright, so make sure that you use your reference at the end of the journal when you are finished. If you're using the ThinkPython, and you should use the ThinkPython as a reference, at least one of the references. You can have 2 references, you can have more. But I highly recommend that you use the ThinkPython. That won't be considered plagiarism because it's a textbook and you're using a reference. So if multiple students have the ThinkPython, that makes sense because we're all using the same textbook in other words, okay? So that's not plagiarism. Plagiarism is when you don't reference your sources or work or your ideas that you may have borrowed explanations or material from somewhere. So remember, the in-text citations are not the same as the textbook citations, okay, that come at the end. And you want to double check all your work to make sure that everything is in APA format. You can Google on the internet or see your college resources for APA format help. Okay, so once more, you're just going to make sure that you enter your experiments, exactly what you did, the code you used, and the output that it produced, whether it worked or not. You're still going to explain what it did, okay? These are going to be your own examples that are going to be unique. Once again, do not use my examples. Avoid plagiarism and being penalized or even expelled for not using unique work. Alright, so I'm just giving an example of using the type exercise when you find the type of a variable by using the type function. And as you can see here, in my example here, produce an error, but that's fine. Remember, you're experimenting. The code doesn't have to work. You're just doing an experiment to see what works, how the compiler or interpreter reacts. You can mix it up. You can use different variations of type for your experiments. Remember, your experiments can come from anywhere in the textbook. You can have all three experiments being an example of using the type function, or you can have all of them being statements in Python, such as print. You can choose what experiments you put in the second part of your journal, okay? I'm just using an example from different parts of chapter 1 to show you the various kinds of experiments that you can do, but you can pick the one that you want to do or that you like the best. All right. All right, so here I'm just demonstrating some more experimentation using the type function to find the type of different data items. And remember that you will need to properly explain this in your journal so that people understand what it is that you are trying to do. Make sure that you have all the references that you need for any textbooks you use for research, and make sure that you use the in-text citations. Remember, all references and citations are in APA format. Check your college guide for that. And if you'd like to join us for a live class, please check the link description for the WhatsApp group that we use. Also check the link description if you need to get part 1 of the video.